When the stagecoach carrying his mail-order bride vanished into a winter storm, everyone told Caleb Vance to wait, to accept that some things weren't meant to be. But he'd read her letters, felt her strength in every word, and he knew one thing with absolute certainty. Eliza Hart was still alive out there, fighting to reach him. So he rode into the whitest hell the frontier had ever seen, searching for a woman he'd never met but already couldn't lose. Stay with me until the end, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The wind came first. It always did in Silver Ridge, sweeping down from the mountains like something with teeth, something that wanted to strip the flesh from your bones and leave you nothing but a warning for the next fool who thought he could outlast it. Caleb Vance stood on the porch of his ranch house, one hand gripping the support beam, the other shielding his eyes against the sting of ice crystals that the gale hurled at him like thrown knives. The sky had gone the color of old bruises, purple and gray and sick with the promise of violence. "It's coming fast," Marcus said behind him. Caleb didn't turn. Marcus Webb had been his ranch hand for 3 years, a good man with a bad leg from a horse that had rolled on him down in Texas. He knew weather, knew horses, knew when to speak and when to shut up. Right now his voice carried an edge that Caleb recognized. Fear dressed up as practicality. "Stage should have been here 2 days ago," Caleb said. "Should have, but this storm's been building for a week. They probably holed up in Dawson's Creek, waiting it out." "Maybe." "More than maybe, Caleb. That's what smart people do. They wait." Caleb finally turned. Marcus stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the dim warmth of the house behind him. Lamplight caught the gray in his beard, made him look older than his 40-some years. "You think she's smart?" Caleb asked. "I think anyone heading out to marry a stranger in the middle of nowhere has got either courage or desperation, and I don't know which scares me more." Marcus shifted his weight, favoring his good leg. "But yeah, her letters sounded smart. Smart enough to know when to stop pushing." Caleb looked back at the horizon. The storm was a wall now, advancing like an army. You could see it swallowing the landscape, erasing the foothills, the distant tree line, everything. In an hour, maybe less, it would be here. And when it hit, nothing would move for days. "The stage left Dawson's Creek 3 days ago," Caleb said quietly. "I got the wire." Silence. Then Marcus swore, low and creative. "You're sure?" "Wired the station myself, asked direct. They confirmed departure, said they'd be here before the storm." "Then where—" "I don't know." But he did know, or rather he knew the possibilities, and every single one of them sat in his gut like spoiled meat. The stage had broken down. The stage had gotten stuck. The stage had tried to outrun the storm and failed, and now it was out there somewhere, buried or wrecked or both. And Eliza Hart was with it. He'd memorized her last letter, carried it in his coat pocket, the paper soft from repeated unfolding. She had good handwriting, clear and strong, no unnecessary flourishes. It matched her words. "Mr. Vance, I won't lie to you about what you're getting. I'm not the kind of woman men write songs about. I'm broad in the shoulders, broader in the hips, and I take up more space than fashion says I should. I've heard every judgment there is to hear about it. But I'm strong. I can work from dawn to dusk without complaint. I can cook, sew, manage accounts, birth calves, and shoot straight enough to keep varmints off the property. I don't require poetry or prettiness in return. I require honesty, respect, and a partner who won't measure my worth by the numbers on a dressmaker's tape. If that suits you, then I'll be on the next stage west. Regards, Eliza Hart." He'd written back the same day, said yes. Said he didn't give a damn about dressmaker's tape, that he needed someone who could stand beside him in building something real out here, not someone decorative who'd wilt at the first hard season. He told her about the ranch, about the isolation, about the winters that could kill you if you weren't careful. She'd written back, "Good. I've never been careful, and I'm still here." That had been 6 weeks ago. "Caleb," Marcus's voice pulled him back. "You're thinking something stupid." "Haven't said anything yet." "Don't need to. I can see it on your face. You're thinking about going out there." "Someone has to." "Not in this. Not now. That storm hits, you won't find your own hand in front of your face. You'll die before you get 5 miles. Caleb walked past him, into the house. It was warm inside, almost too warm. He'd built the fire up that morning out of habit, preparing for her arrival. The front room was clean, the table set. He'd even put out the good dishes, the ones his mother had brought west in a wagon 20 years ago. Stupid, maybe. But he'd wanted her to see that he'd tried. "How long you think someone can survive out there?" he asked, pulling his heavy coat from the peg. "Caleb." "How long, Marcus?" The older man's jaw worked. "Depends. If they found shelter, maybe a few days. If they didn't—" He didn't finish. Caleb strapped on his gun belt, checked the revolver. 6 rounds, clean and dry. He had more ammunition in his saddlebag, had kept everything ready because some part of him, the part that had survived this long on the frontier by trusting his gut, had known something was wrong. "I'm going to find her," he said. "You don't even know where to look. Stage route's a straight line from Dawson's Creek. I'll follow it." "In a whiteout? You'll get lost. You'll freeze. And then what?" "Then she's lost her husband before she even met him, and I'm out here alone trying to run this place through winter." Caleb stopped, looked at him. Marcus wasn't afraid of work or hardship, but there was genuine fear in his eyes now. Not for the ranch. For Caleb. "I can't just sit here," Caleb said. "You can. That's exactly what you do. You wait for the storm to pass, then you go look, with clear skies and actual daylight." She might not have clear skies and daylight. She might not be alive. The words hung there, brutal and honest. Caleb felt them land, felt the weight of their truth. But underneath that truth was something else, something he couldn't articulate even to himself. It wasn't logic. It wasn't even hope, exactly. It was the feeling he'd gotten reading her letters, the sense of solidity behind her words. Eliza Hart wasn't someone who gave up easy. She'd said so herself. "I'm still here." "If it was you out there," Caleb said quietly, "would you want me to wait?" Marcus looked away. His jaw tightened. When he spoke again, his voice was rough. "That's not fair. Life out here ain't fair. You taught me that. I also taught you not to throw your life away on a fool's errand." "This isn't a fool's errand." "Then what is it?" Caleb pulled on his coat, started buttoning it. "It's a promise." "You never promised her anything?" "I promised to be the kind of man worth riding into hell for. Seems only right I do the same." He gathered the rest of his gear: extra rope, matches wrapped in oilcloth, a small axe, dried meat, a flask of whiskey. Marcus watched in silence, his face a mask of frustration and resignation. When Caleb headed for the door, Marcus followed. The barn was 50 yards from the house. The wind had picked up even in the few minutes they'd been inside, and snow was starting to fall. Not the gentle kind, but hard pellets that stung exposed skin. Caleb's horse, a big roan gelding named Tucker, stamped and snorted in his stall, sensing the weather's mood. "You take Ranger instead," Marcus said, pointing to his own horse. "He's got better footing in deep snow." Caleb shook his head. "Tucker knows me. I need a horse that'll trust me when things get bad." "Things are already bad." "Then I need him even more." He saddled Tucker quickly, efficiently. The horse stood steady, his breath steaming in the cold air. Caleb checked everything twice: cinched tight, bedroll secure, supplies balanced. Marcus handed him an extra blanket without a word. "If I'm not back in 3 days," Caleb started. "Don't." "Marcus." "I said don't." The older man's voice cracked. "You come back. You hear me? You find her or you don't. But you come back. Because if you die out there, I swear I'll—" He stopped, looked away. "Just come back." Caleb gripped his shoulder. 3 days. If I'm not back, you ride to town, get the sheriff. Tell him where I went. He won't come looking in this. No. But he'll know where to find the bodies come spring. It was a grim joke, but neither of them laughed. Caleb swung up into the saddle. Tucker shifted beneath him, eager to move despite the weather. Or maybe because of it. Horses had instincts about these things, knew when motion meant survival. "Caleb," Marcus grabbed the reins. "She's a stranger, you know that, right? For all you know, she's not even the woman in those letters. People lie. Some do. Most do. Especially when they want something." Caleb looked down at him. You read her letters? You showed them to me. Then you know she's not lying. I know her words sounded real. That's not the same thing. It's all I've got. He pulled the reins free, gently but firmly. Tucker moved forward, out of the barn and into the rising storm. The snow hit them immediately, a wall of white chaos. Caleb pulled his scarf up over his nose and mouth, tugged his hat down low. Already he could feel the cold working its way through his layers, patient and relentless. He didn't look back. The stage route out of Dawson's Creek ran northeast, following the valley between two mountain ridges. In good weather, it was a hard 12-hour ride. In this, it might as well have been 1,000 miles. Within an hour, Caleb couldn't see more than 10 feet in any direction. The world had become nothing but white and wind and the steady crunch of Tucker's hooves through deepening snow. He'd tied a rope from his saddle to his wrist, a trick his father had taught him. If he got separated from Tucker somehow, thrown, lost, disoriented, he could follow the rope back. It wasn't much, but out here you took every advantage you could get. The cold was serious now. Not painful yet, but getting there. His fingers ached inside his gloves. His face felt tight, frozen. He'd wrapped his scarf around every exposed bit of skin, but the wind found gaps, always found gaps. His eyes watered from the sting of ice, and he had to keep wiping them clear. Tucker plodded on, head down, following some internal compass that Caleb trusted more than his own sense of direction. Horses knew things. They could smell water under snow, sense danger before it showed itself. Right now, Caleb was counting on Tucker to keep them pointed the right way. The first hour passed, then the second. The landscape, what little he could see of it, remained unchanging. White above, white below, white everywhere. Occasionally a dark shape would loom out of the storm, a boulder, a twisted tree, and then vanish again just as quickly. Markers in a world without markers. Caleb's mind wandered despite the cold. He thought about Eliza's letters, about the way she'd written about her life before, working in her father's store, keeping the books, managing inventory. She'd been good at it, she said, but it hadn't been enough. When her father died and left her nothing but debt, she'd sold everything, paid what she could, and headed west looking for a new start. I could have stayed, she'd written, could have found some man willing to overlook my size in exchange for my labor. But I didn't want to be overlooked. I wanted to be chosen, even if it meant choosing a stranger in a territory I'd never seen. He'd understood that. After his own wife died 3 years back, fever, quick and merciless, people had expected him to remarry fast. Practical thing to do. Ranch needed a woman's touch, everyone said, but he hadn't wanted practical. Hadn't wanted someone who came to him out of social pressure or economic necessity. He'd wanted what Eliza wanted, choice, partnership, something built on decision rather than circumstance. So he'd placed an advertisement, been honest about the isolation, the work, the hardship. Most of the responses had been flowery things, full of romance and promises that would shatter the first time winter bit down hard. Eliza's had been different, clear-eyed, real. He'd known immediately she was the one, and now she was out here somewhere, and he was betting his life that his instincts had been right. The wind screamed. Tucker stumbled, caught himself. Caleb leaned forward, patted the horse's neck. Ice had formed in Tucker's mane, made it stiff and strange to touch. "Good boy," he said, though the wind tore the words away. "Keep going." They kept going. Somewhere around the 4th hour, Caleb started to doubt. Not the decision to come, that felt as solid as ever, but the logistics of it. Marcus had been right about the visibility. He couldn't see the trail, couldn't see landmarks. For all he knew, they'd veered miles off course, were wandering in circles. He could pass within 50 feet of the wrecked stage and never know it. The cold was worse now. His feet had gone numb. His hands were clumsy, even inside thick gloves. He flexed his fingers constantly, trying to keep blood flowing, but it was a losing battle. The cold out here didn't just take your extremities. It worked its way inward, toward your core, and once it got there, you were done. He thought about turning back. Seriously considered it. The smart play was to find shelter, wait out the worst of it, try again when he could actually see. But every hour he waited was an hour Eliza didn't have. If she was injured, if she was exposed to this. Tucker stopped. Caleb blinked, looked around. Nothing but white. "What is it, boy?" The horse's ears swiveled forward, alert. Then Caleb heard it too, or rather, felt it. A change in the wind sound, a subtle deepening that meant they were near something large. A A cliff face, maybe. Or a building. He urged Tucker forward, slow and careful. The snow was nearly to the horse's knees now, made movement laborious. But Tucker pressed on, and gradually a shape emerged from the storm. A way station. It was small, barely more than a shack, but it had 4 walls and a roof. The door hung crooked on its hinges, and snow had drifted inside, but it was shelter. Caleb dismounted, his legs almost buckling when they took his weight. He led Tucker around to the lee side, out of the direct wind, and tied him to a post that was more hope than security. Inside, the station was deserted. There was an old stove, a pile of wood that was damp but might burn if he was patient, a bench, some shelves that held nothing but mouse droppings and ancient cobwebs. But the walls blocked the wind, and that alone was worth its weight in gold. Caleb got a fire going. It took longer than it should have. His hands weren't working right, kept fumbling the matches, but eventually smoke began to curl up, then flames. Weak at first, reluctant, but growing. He held his hands over the heat, felt pins and needles as circulation returned. It hurt more than the cold had. He rationed himself a strip of dried meat, a swallow of whiskey. The whiskey burned going down, spread warmth through his chest. A false warmth, he knew. Alcohol didn't actually heat you up, just made you think it did. But right now he'd take the illusion. Outside, Tucker whinnied, a worried sound. Caleb stood, went to the door. The horse was still there, head raised, looking out into the storm. His ears were pinned back, nervous. Then Caleb heard it, a sound that didn't belong to wind or snow. Voices. Faint, distant, but real. Human voices carried on the wind. He grabbed his rifle, stepped out into the storm. Hello? The wind shrieked. The voices, if they'd been real, were gone. Hello, can you hear me? Nothing. Maybe he'd imagined it. Maybe the cold was getting to him, making him hear things that weren't there. He started to turn back and then, help! A woman's voice, weak, nearly lost, but definitely real. Caleb's heart kicked. Where are you? Here! We're here! He plunged into the storm, following the direction of the voice. Tucker pulled at his rope, wanting to follow, but Caleb left him tied. Couldn't risk losing the horse. He held the rifle in one hand, the other stretched out in front of him, feeling his way through the whiteness. Keep talking, he shouted. I'm coming! We're... The voice broke off in a fit of coughing, then fainter. Can't. Much longer. He found them 30 yards from the station, nearly buried. 3 figures huddled against a fallen log, so covered in snow they looked like part of the landscape. Caleb dropped to his knees beside them. I've got you, he said. I've got you. Can you walk? One of them, a man, middle-aged with frost in his beard, looked up. His eyes were glazed, confused. Stage wrecked. I know. Come on. There's shelter. Can you stand? Between the 3 of them, they managed. The man, a younger woman who might have been his daughter, and an older woman who was barely conscious. Caleb half-dragged, half-carried them back to the station, got them inside, close to the fire. The younger woman was crying, silent tears that froze on her cheeks. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Save it, Caleb said, not unkindly. He pulled blankets from his bedroll, wrapped them around the survivors. Where's the stage driver? The man shook his head. Dead. First day. Hit his head when we crashed. How long have you been out here? 2 days? Maybe 3? Hard to tell. How many were on the stage? 6 of us. Driver makes 7. The man's voice was hoarse, scraped raw. Driver's dead. Samuel, he was a preacher. Went for help yesterday morning. Never came back. That leaves us 3. Caleb's stomach tightened. And the other 2? The younger woman spoke up. A woman. Eliza, I think her name was. And a man. A gambler type. She looked at her father. They left. Left? When? Yesterday. Maybe the day before. Times... She trailed off, looking lost. Why'd they leave? The older woman, the one who'd been barely conscious, stirred. Her voice came out as a rasp. Crazy woman. Said she'd walk. Couldn't talk her out of it. Caleb felt ice form in his chest that had nothing to do with the weather. Walk where? Here, the man said. To Silver Ridge. Said her fiancé.
would be waiting. We told her she'd never make it, but she insisted.
The gambler went with her, tried to protect her, I think. How long ago? Full day, maybe more. Caleb stood, turned toward the door. You can't go back out there, the man said. It's suicide. She's out there. She's dead. I'm sorry, but no one survives a full day in this. We barely survived with shelter. You don't know her. I know weather. I know what it does to people. Caleb looked at him. The man was sincere, honestly trying to save his life. But he didn't understand. Couldn't understand. I'm going, Caleb said. You three stay here. Keep the fire going. When the storm breaks, follow the trail northeast. You'll reach my ranch in 4, maybe 5 hours. Man there named Marcus. That's it. Tell him Caleb sent you. You're insane, the younger woman said. Maybe. He checked his rifle, reloaded his revolver. But she came all this way for me. I'm not going to let her die alone. He walked out before they could argue further. Tucker was where he'd left him, patient and solid. Caleb untied him, swung back into the saddle. His body screamed protest. He'd just gotten warm, just gotten feeling back in his extremities. Now he was throwing it all away, diving back into the cold. But Eliza was out here, a full day ahead of him, in weather that killed within hours. If she was still alive, and he had to believe she was, she wouldn't be for much longer. The storm had worsened. Night was coming, turning the white chaos into black chaos. Caleb could barely see Tucker's ears in front of him, but he pressed on, following the general direction of the trail, trusting to luck and prayer and sheer stubborn will. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time had no meaning anymore. There was only the cold, the wind, the rhythm of Tucker's hooves. Caleb's thoughts started to scatter, to drift. He caught himself nodding forward in the saddle, jerked awake. That was dangerous. Sleep out here meant death. He slapped his face, hard. The pain helped, focused him. Eliza, he shouted into the wind. Eliza Hart! No answer, just the shriek of the storm. Eliza. Nothing. He kept riding, kept shouting. His voice grew hoarse, then raw, then failed entirely. But he kept moving his lips, kept forming her name, as if the intention alone could reach her. Tucker stumbled, caught himself, stumbled again. I know, Caleb whispered. I know, boy. Just a little further. But he didn't know. Had no idea how far further was. He was navigating by faith now, pure and simple. Faith that he was going the right direction. Faith that she was still alive. Faith that he'd find her before the cold took them both. The world narrowed to a tunnel, white walls closing in. He couldn't feel his hands anymore, couldn't feel his feet. His face was a mask of ice. He tried to move his fingers, couldn't tell if they responded. Bad sign, very bad sign. Tucker stopped. No, Caleb said. No, we keep going. We have to. Then he saw it. A dark shape in the snow ahead, small, huddled. His heart stopped. He half fell from the saddle, his legs barely holding him. Stumbled forward through snow that grabbed at him like hands. Reached the shape. It was a man. The gambler, probably. Frozen solid, curled around himself. His face was peaceful, almost serene. The cold did that sometimes. Made dying look like sleeping. Caleb looked around wildly. Eliza! Eliza, where are you? Then he saw the second shape, 20 feet further on, larger, collapsed face down in the snow. No, 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 no! He reached her in seconds that felt like hours, dropped to his knees beside her. She was covered in snow, ice crusted on her coat, her hair. He brushed it away with hands that wouldn't work properly, turned her over. Her face was blue-white. Her eyes were closed. She wasn't breathing. No, he said aloud. No, you don't get to die. Not now. Not after all this. He pulled off his glove with his teeth, pressed his fingers to her throat, looking for a pulse. His hands were so numb he couldn't feel anything, couldn't tell. There. Faint. So faint it might have been his imagination. But there. She was alive. Barely. But alive. Caleb looked around. No shelter, no cave. Nothing but open ground and killing wind. If he stayed here, they'd both die within the hour. If he tried to get her back to the way station, the movement might kill her. But staying was definitely death, and movement was maybe death, and maybe was better than definitely. He got his arms under her, tried to lift. She was heavy. The survivors had been right about that. She was a big woman, solid and substantial. In any other circumstances, he wouldn't have thought twice about it. But exhausted, frozen, with hands that barely worked, he struggled, got her part way up, lost his grip, tried again. "Come on," he growled, to himself, to her, to the universe. "Come on." Third try, he got her up, cradled against his chest. She was dead weight, completely unconscious. He stumbled back to Tucker, somehow got her draped over the saddle. No grace to it, no care, just desperation. Tucker stood steady, bless him, didn't shy or bolt, just accepted this new burden with the patience of saints. Caleb climbed up behind her, wrapped his arms around her to keep her from sliding off, grabbed the reins. "Home," he told Tucker. "Get us home." The horse turned, started walking, and Caleb held on, to the reins, to Eliza, to consciousness, with everything he had left. The ride back was a nightmare, worse than the ride out. Caleb kept slipping toward darkness, jerking himself awake. He talked to keep himself conscious, talked to Tucker, talked to Eliza, talked to the storm. "You're going to make it," he told her. "You hear me? You're going to make it because you didn't come all this way to die in my arms before I even learned your voice. You're going to wake up, and you're going to be furious that I had to rescue you, and I'm going to tell you that you're the stubbornest woman I've ever met, and you're going to say, 'Damn right,' and then—" His voice broke. He pulled her tighter against him. "Then we're going to build something worth all this hell, you and me. We're going to prove everyone wrong, everyone who said you couldn't make it, everyone who doubted. We're going to show them what strength really looks like." She didn't respond, didn't move. But she was warm against him, warmer than she should be, which worried him. Heat loss did strange things, made you think you were burning when you were freezing. Time stopped meaning anything. There was only movement, only the next step, the next breath. Caleb's world shrank to the woman in his arms and the horse beneath him, and the small, fierce determination not to let either of them die. When the way station appeared out of the darkness, he almost didn't believe it, thought it was a hallucination. But Tucker walked straight to it, and the door was real when Caleb kicked it open, and the fire inside was still burning. The three survivors jumped up, startled. "Help me," Caleb said. They did. Got Eliza inside, laid her near the fire. The younger woman, bless her, immediately started working, removing Eliza's frozen outer clothes, wrapping her in dry blankets, checking her breathing. "She's alive," she said, wonder in her voice. "Barely, but alive." Caleb collapsed against the wall. Every muscle in his body was screaming. His vision was blurring. Someone, the older woman, pressed a cup of something hot into his hands. He drank without tasting it. "You found her," the man said. Simple statement, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "Yeah," Caleb said. "You're both insane." "Yeah. You're also both alive." Caleb looked at Eliza. She was still unconscious, still blue-tinged, still hovering in that space between breathing and not, but her chest was moving, shallow, irregular, but moving. "Yeah," he said again, "we are." And then the darkness took him, and he knew nothing more. Caleb woke to pain. Not the sharp kind that meant something was broken, but the deep bone-level ache that came from pushing a body past every reasonable limit. His hands throbbed. His feet felt like they'd been hammered. Every breath pulled at muscles in his chest that had clenched too tight for too long. He opened his eyes. The way station's ceiling swam into focus, rough timber, gaps where daylight leaked through. Daylight. That meant he'd been out for hours. "Easy." A woman's voice. The younger survivor from yesterday. She appeared in his field of vision, pressed a hand to his shoulder when he tried to sit up. "Don't move too fast, your body's been through hell." "Eliza." His voice came out as a croak. "Still alive. Sleeping, I think. Hard to tell." She helped him sit up slowly, propping him against the wall. "You got frostbite on 3 fingers and both feet. Could be worse. Could be a lot worse." Caleb looked at his hands. They were wrapped in cloth, clumsy and thick. He tried to flex them, felt the pull of damaged tissue. The woman was right. It could have been worse. He'd known men who'd lost whole hands to cold like that. Across the small room, Eliza lay wrapped in every blanket they had, positioned as close to the fire as was safe. Her face was visible, still too pale, but no longer that terrible blue-white. Her chest rose and fell with something approaching normal rhythm. "How long?" Caleb asked. "You've been out about 6 hours, her longer. She woke up once, maybe an hour ago. Didn't say anything, just looked around like she couldn't figure out where she was. Then she was gone again." "The storm?" "Broke before dawn. Sky's clear now." The woman glanced toward the door. "Your horse is fine, by the way. Tougher than any of us." Caleb tried to stand. His legs cooperated barely. The woman, he still didn't know her name, steadied him. "Thank you," he said. "You saved our lives. Least I can do is keep you from falling on your face." She paused. "I'm Sarah, by the way. That's my father, Thomas. And Mrs. Chen. She's the one who made it through because she's apparently indestructible." Thomas was outside, visible through the open door, tending to the horses. Mrs. Chen sat on the bench, wrapped in a blanket, watching Eliza with an expression Caleb couldn't quite read. He made his way over to Eliza, lowered himself to sit beside her. Up close, he could see details he'd missed in the chaos of last night. She was maybe 30, with a strong face that wouldn't have looked out of place on a ship's captain or a ranch foreman. Her dark hair was matted and tangled, her skin marked with the red raw patches of frostbite. Her hands, resting on top of the blankets, were big and capable looking, working hands. "She fought hard," Mrs. Chen said quietly. "In the stage after we crashed. She was the one who kept us organized, made us ration the food, kept us from giving up." The older woman's eyes were sharp, assessing. "When she said she was leaving, we thought she'd lost her mind, but she hadn't. She just knew something we didn't." "What's that?" Caleb asked. "That waiting to be saved is how you die." Caleb looked at Eliza's face, trying to imagine what those hours had been like. Walking into a storm that had nearly killed him on horseback, knowing every step might be her last, choosing to take them anyway. "The man who went with her," he said. "The gambler, you know his name?" "Patrick something, O'Brien maybe?" Mrs. Chen shook her head. "He didn't want to go, but when she insisted, he said he couldn't let her walk alone. Gentleman to the end, I suppose." "How far did they make it?" "You found them, you tell me." "Maybe 5 miles from here." Mrs. Chen nodded slowly. 5 miles, in that storm, on foot. She looked at Eliza with something like respect. "Most people wouldn't make it 50 yards. Sarah brought Caleb water, insisted he drink. It hurt going down. His throat was raw from shouting into the wind, but he finished it. His body needed it, even if every part of him felt too tired to care. "We should get moving," Thomas said, coming inside. He stamped snow off his boots. "Storm's done, but another one could roll in. We need to make it to civilization while we can." "My ranch is 4 hours northeast," Caleb said. "You'll find my man Marcus there. He'll take care of you. Get word to town." "What about you?" Caleb looked at Eliza. "I'm staying until she can travel." "That could be days." "Then it's days." Thomas opened his mouth, probably to argue about practicality or common sense, but Sarah touched his arm. "Let him be, Pa. These two earned the right to do things their own way." They gathered their few belongings, prepared to leave. Before they went, Sarah knelt beside Eliza, brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Tell her she's tougher than anyone I've ever met," she said to Caleb. "Tell her we're all alive because she refused to give up." "I'll tell her." They left. Caleb watched through the door as they mounted up. Thomas and Sarah on one horse, Mrs. Chen on another that had belonged to the stage. They headed northeast, following the trail toward his ranch. In a few hours, they'd be warm and fed, telling Marcus a story that probably wouldn't make much sense until Caleb filled in the gaps. Then it was just him and Eliza and the crackling fire. He tended the fire first, built it back up. Then checked Eliza's wrappings, made sure her frostbite was protected. Her breathing had evened out, deepened. Real sleep now, not unconsciousness. That was good. That meant her body was healing instead of just surviving. Caleb's own body was screaming for rest, but he couldn't afford it yet. He went outside, checked on Tucker. The horse was fine, already looking better with the storm past. Caleb gave him water, a handful of grain from the emergency supplies. Tucker butted his head against Caleb's chest, gentle. I know, Caleb said. You're the real hero here. He found his saddlebag, pulled out the dried meat and hardtack he'd packed, forced himself to eat even though he wasn't hungry. The body needed fuel, especially after what they'd been through. By the time he came back inside, Eliza was stirring. Her eyes opened slowly, unfocused. She blinked at the ceiling, then turned her head and saw him. For a long moment, she just stared. You're real, she said finally. Her voice was rough, barely above a whisper. Caleb moved closer, careful not to crowd her. I'm real. Caleb Vance? That's me. She closed her eyes, and he thought she'd slip back into sleep. But then she spoke again. I'm sorry. For what? I was supposed to arrive proper, clean dress, hair done up, make a good impression. She opened her eyes again, looked down at herself. Instead, I show up half dead and frozen. You showed up alive. That's the only impression that matters. The gambler, Patrick, did he... Caleb shook his head. Eliza's face tightened. She looked away. He didn't want to come. I made him. Convinced him we'd be fine if we just kept moving. Her voice cracked. I killed him. No. Caleb's voice came out harder than he intended. The storm killed him. You tried to save him by not leaving him alone in that wreck. I should have listened. Everyone said to wait, said walking was suicide. She laughed, bitter and broken. Guess they were right. If you'd waited, you'd all be dead. The stage had no supplies left, no heat, no shelter worth a damn. You did the only thing that had a chance of working. But it didn't work. You're alive. That's working enough. She looked at him then, really looked. Her eyes were hazel, he noticed. Sharp and intelligent, even exhausted and hurting. You came after me. Of course I did. Why? You don't even know me. I know your letters. Letters aren't people. No, but they're promises. And you promised to come, so I promised to find you. Eliza studied his face like she was trying to solve a puzzle. The others at the stage, they said you were crazy to come, said no one rides into a storm like that for a stranger. They were probably right. So why did you? Caleb considered the question. The real answer was complicated, layered. It was about loneliness and hope and the specific kind of desperation that came from building a life in the middle of nowhere with no one to share it. It was about reading her letters and feeling, for the first time in 3 years, like someone understood what he was trying to build out here. It was about faith in his own judgment, in his ability to read people through their words, but what he said was simpler. Because you came all this way for me. Seemed only fair I do the same. She absorbed that, nodded slowly. Fair enough. They fell into silence. The fire popped and hissed. Outside, the wind had died completely, leaving that particular stillness that follows a storm. The world holding its breath. I can't feel my feet, Eliza said eventually. Frostbite, your hands too, probably. How bad? I don't know, everything's numb. We need to get you warm, slowly, too fast, and the tissue damage gets worse. He'd seen frostbite before, knew the drill. Can you wiggle your toes? She tried, her face scrunched up in concentration. A little, I think. That's good, means they're still connected to you. What happens if they're not? Let's not worry about that yet. But Eliza wasn't the type to shy from hard truths. I could lose them, the toes. Maybe. Probably not all of them, but maybe some. She processed this with a calmness that impressed him. No tears, no panic, just acceptance of another hard fact in a life that had clearly taught her about hard facts. Well, she said, guess I'll have trouble dancing at our wedding. It took Caleb a second to realize she was joking. When he did, he felt something in his chest loosen. Anyone who could joke about losing toes was someone who'd survive. I'm not much of a dancer anyway, he said. Good. We'll be well matched then. Another silence. More comfortable this time. I need to see them, Eliza said. My feet. I need to know what I'm dealing with. Caleb hesitated. The damage wouldn't be pretty, but she had a right to know. He unwrapped her feet carefully, revealing skin that was mottled red and white, blistered in places.
Some of the toes were darker than others. Not black yet. That would mean death of the tissue, but heading that way. Eliza looked without flinching. How long before we know? Few days, maybe a week. Depends on how much circulation comes back. And if it doesn't, then we deal with it. You mean I deal with it? No, I mean we. He met her eyes. You didn't come all this way to do this alone, and I didn't pull you out of that snow to abandon you now. Whatever happens, we handle it together. Eliza's expression shifted. Something in her face softened, and for a moment she looked vulnerable in a way that had nothing to do with injury. You don't have to do that. The arrangement was for a wife who could work. If I'm crippled, you're not crippled. I might be. Then we adjust. Life on a ranch requires strength, not just legs. You've got strength. I saw it in your letters, saw it in the fact that you walked 5 miles through a blizzard that killed a healthy man. He wrapped her feet again, gentle but firm. You'll work. Maybe differently than you planned, but you'll work. She was quiet for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice was thick. I don't understand you. What's to understand? Most men would have left me in that snow. Most men would see damaged goods and call off the arrangement. Hell, most men wouldn't have ridden out in the first place. She wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand. So what's wrong with you? Caleb laughed. Couldn't help it. You want a list? I'm serious. So am I. I'm stubborn, impatient. I hold grudges. I'm not good with pretty words or social graces. I prefer horses to most people. He paused. And I make promises I can't always keep. But the ones I can, I do. That's the only thing about me that matters right now. Eliza studied him like she was memorizing his face. Your letters didn't mention the stubbornness. Didn't think it was a selling point. It might be. Out here, anyway. She shifted slightly, winced. Help me sit up? He did, propping her against the wall with blankets for support. Sitting, she was tall, broad-shouldered, everything she'd described in her letters. Her size had clearly been a source of judgment in her life. He could see it in the way she held herself, like she was braced for criticism. But all Caleb saw was someone built for hard work and harder survival. I should warn you, Eliza said. I'm not easy. I've got opinions, and I don't keep them quiet. I'll argue with you when you're wrong. I'll expect to be heard. Good. I could use someone who pushes back. Marcus agrees with me too much. I snore. So do I. I can't cook fancy, just practical food, meat, potatoes, bread, nothing with French names. I don't even know French names for food. She smiled, small but real. You're taking this well. Taking what well? Finding out your mail-order bride is a half-frozen mess who might lose her toes and comes with the blood of a good man on her conscience. Caleb reached over, took her hand. Her fingers were cold, the skin rough. He held it carefully, aware of the damage. I'm taking it exactly as well as you're taking finding out your husband to be as reckless enough to ride into a killer storm on a hunch. Not a hunch. A promise. See? We already understand each other. Eliza looked at their joined hands. This isn't how I imagined our meeting. How did you imagine it? I'd step off the stage. You'd be waiting. We'd be awkward and formal. You'd take me to your ranch, show me around. Maybe we'd have dinner. Talk about expectations and arrangements. She paused. Eventually, we'd figure out if we could stand each other. And now? Now I already know you're either the best man I've ever met or completely insane. Haven't decided which. Could be both. That's what worries me. They talked through the afternoon. Small things at first, her journey west, his ranch, the specifics of what life looked like out here, then bigger things. Her father's death, the debt, the choice to start over. His wife's death, the grief, the slow rebuild. They traded stories like people getting to know each other's scars, mapping out the damage life had done and how they'd survived it. Eliza told him about growing up in her father's store, learning numbers and inventory before she learned to read. About being told from childhood that she was too big, too loud, too much. About shrinking herself to fit other people's comfort, and then one day, deciding to stop. I was engaged once, she said. Before I came west. Man named Robert, lawyer. Everyone said it was a good match. I was 26, he was 35. Old enough that we were both supposed to be grateful. What happened?
He proposed in front of his whole family, big production, ring, speech, the works, and I said yes because that's what you do. But afterward, when we were alone, he told me I'd need to lose weight before the wedding, said he couldn't have a fat wife, bad for his practice. Her voice was flat, factual. I gave him back the ring the next day. Good. His mother came to see me, said I was being unreasonable, that marriage required compromise, that I should be grateful a man like Robert wanted me at all. Eliza looked at Caleb. I told her I'd rather die alone than spend my life grateful for crumbs. What'd she say to that? Called me prideful, said pride was a sin. Eliza shrugged. Maybe it is, but it kept me from marrying a man who'd spend our whole lives trying to make me smaller. Caleb thought about that, about the kind of strength it took to walk away from security, from social approval, from all the pressure that came with being a woman past a certain age without a husband. Your father support your decision? He'd already passed by then. Maybe that made it easier. No one to disappoint except myself. She paused. What about you? Your wife, did you love her? The question was direct. Most people tiptoed around it. Caleb appreciated the honesty. Yeah, I did. Tell me about her. Why? Because she's part of who you are. If we're doing this, really doing this, I need to know all of it. So he told her about Margaret, who'd been small and fierce and utterly fearless, who'd matched him argument for argument and never backed down, who'd made the ranch a home instead of just a place to work, who'd died in 3 days from a fever that came out of nowhere and took everything with it when it left. I was angry for a long time, Caleb said, at her for dying, at myself for not being able to stop it, at this place for being so far from doctors who might have helped. He stared at the fire. Eventually the anger faded, but the empty didn't. Is that why you sent for a wife? To fill the empty? Partly. Also because the ranch needs 2 people, can't run it alone, not properly, and because... He searched for words. Because being alone out here changes you, makes you hard in ways that aren't good. I needed someone to remind me there's more to life than just surviving it. Eliza nodded slowly. I can't replace her. I don't want you to. She's part of my past. You're part of my future. Those are different things. And if I can't be what you need, then we'll figure out what you can be. Life doesn't follow plans out here. You adapt or you die. We'll adapt. Night fell. Caleb kept the fire going, rationed out their supplies. Eliza slept in fits and starts, her body still recovering. Each time she woke, he was there. They'd talk for a while, then she'd drift off again. Sometime near midnight, she woke shivering despite the fire and blankets. Caleb moved closer, wrapped his arms around her, sharing body heat. She stiffened at first, then relaxed against him. This proper? She asked. Nothing about this situation is proper. Fair point. She was quiet for a moment. Caleb? Yeah? Thank you for coming after me. You already thanked me. I mean it, though. You could have died. Almost did die, and you barely know me. I know enough. What do you know? He thought about her letters. The way she wrote, clear, honest, unafraid to show her flaws or ask for what she wanted. The way she'd walked into a storm rather than wait to be saved. The way she looked at hard truths without flinching. I know you're the kind of person who keeps going when stopping would be easier, he said. I know you'd rather die on your feet than live on your knees. I know you don't give up. He tightened his arms slightly. That's more than most people ever show about themselves. Eliza was quiet, then soft. I was scared. In the storm. I've never been that scared. But you kept walking. Didn't seem like I had a choice. You did. You could have stayed with the wreck, could have given up. You chose not to. Patrick chose to come with me. And now he's dead. He chose. You didn't force him. Men make their own decisions, bear their own consequences. That's supposed to make me feel better? No, it's supposed to be true. Feeling better comes later. She absorbed that. Outside, a coyote called, distant, mournful, the sound of the frontier at night. Tell me about the ranch, Eliza said. What's it like? So he did. Described the house he'd built with his own hands, the barn, the cattle. The way the sun hit the mountains at dawn. The summer storms that rolled in fast and violent. The winter quiet. The daily rhythm of work that never ended but gave life structure and purpose. Sounds hard, she said. It is. Sounds lonely. It has been. Sounds perfect. He looked down at her. Yeah? Yeah. I've had enough of people and their judgments and their narrow ideas about how life should look. Out here, we make our own rules. Within reason. Nature's got its own rules. They're stricter than any society. But fair. Nature doesn't care what size you are, just whether you're strong enough to survive. And you are. We'll see. Ask me again when my toes fall off. He could feel her smiling against his chest. Despite everything, the pain, the fear, the uncertainty, she could still joke. That told him more than any letter ever could. They sat like that until dawn, talking when they had energy, quiet when they didn't. Learning each other in the way people do when pretense is impossible. By the time gray light started filtering through the gaps in the walls, Caleb felt like he'd known her years instead of hours. We should head out soon, he said. Get you somewhere warmer, somewhere with actual walls. Your ranch? Yeah. It's a day's ride in good weather. Might take longer with you injured. I can ride. We'll see. I can, she insisted. I'm not helpless. Never said you were. But there's a difference between helpless and hurt. You're hurt. No shame in admitting it. Eliza pushed herself more upright, winced but didn't complain. Help me stand. I need to know if my legs work. Caleb helped her up. She swayed, grabbed his arm for balance. Her legs held, but barely. She took a step, nearly fell. He caught her. Damn, she muttered. Give it time. Don't have time. Every day we wait is a day your man Marcus is worrying. A day your ranch goes unattended. Marcus can handle a few days, and the ranch has survived worse than my absence. Still, I'd rather get there. Start figuring out what our life looks like. She looked at him. Unless you're having second thoughts. Are you? I asked first. No second thoughts. You? She smiled. Ask me when we get there. They prepared to leave as the sun broke over the horizon. Caleb saddled Tucker, who seemed refreshed by the rest and ready to move. The sky was clear, painfully blue. The kind of sky that made yesterday's storm feel like a fever dream. Getting Eliza onto the horse was a challenge. Her body wasn't cooperating, muscles stiff and damaged. But between her determination and his support, they managed. He climbed up behind her, settled her against his chest. Hold on, he said, planning on it. They rode northeast, following the trail toward home. The snow was deep, but the storm had packed it down some, made passage possible if not easy. Tucker moved carefully, picking his way through drifts. Caleb kept one arm around Eliza, holding her steady. The landscape was transformed. Everything buried under white, the world made new and strange. Beautiful in its harshness. Eliza looked around with what might have been wonder, or might have been exhaustion. It's bigger than I imagined, she said. What is? All of it. The sky. The space. Back east, everything's crowded. Buildings, people, noise. Here it's just, she gestured vaguely. Empty. Lonely empty or peaceful empty? Haven't decided yet. They rode through the morning. Caleb told her about the territory, pointed out landmarks. That ridge where wolves denned in winter. That valley where the best grazing was. That creek that ran year-round, fed by mountain snow. He was showing her his world, piece by piece. Around noon, they stopped to rest. Caleb helped Eliza down, let her walk, hobble, really, to get blood moving. She was in pain, he could tell. But she didn't complain, just gritted her teeth and kept moving. You're angry, she said suddenly. Caleb looked up from checking Tucker's hooves. What? At me. For leaving the stage. For putting you through all this. I'm not angry. You've barely said 10 words in the last hour. I'm thinking. About? He straightened, met her eyes. About how close I came to not finding you. About what would have happened if I'd turned back an hour earlier. If I'd missed you in the dark.
He paused. About Patrick O'Brien and how I pulled you off that snow and left him there. You couldn't carry us both. I know, but knowing doesn't change what I did. Eliza moved closer, awkward on her damaged feet. He made his choice. I made mine. You made yours. We all knew the risks. Her voice was firm.
You want to honor his memory? Then stop second-guessing yourself and help me build a life worth the one he gave up. Caleb looked at her, this woman he barely knew, who somehow understood exactly what he needed to hear. You always this direct? Usually more so. I'm being gentle because you saved my life. I'll take it. They mounted up again, continued on. The afternoon sun was warm despite the cold, made the snow glitter like broken glass. Caleb found himself relaxing into the rhythm of the ride, into Eliza's weight against him. She fit there. Not perfectly. Nothing in life fit perfectly, but well enough. There, he said eventually, pointing. That's the edge of my land. Eliza leaned forward, looking. The ranch was still hours away, but they'd crossed onto his property. 40 acres of snow-covered frontier that he'd bought cheap and built into something real through sheer stubbornness. Ours, she corrected. Our land. The words settled between them. Ours. A promise and a claim all at once. Yeah, Caleb said. Ours. They rode the rest of the way in comfortable silence, the sun tracking west behind them, their shadows stretching long across the snow. And despite everything, the pain, the loss, the uncertainty of what came next, Caleb felt something he hadn't felt in 3 years. He felt ready. The ranch came into view just as the sun touched the western peaks, painting everything gold and shadow. Eliza had been dozing against Caleb's chest, but she stirred when Tucker's gait changed, lifted her head. That's it? She asked. That's home. It wasn't much to look at from a distance. A house, a barn, a few outbuildings scattered across a valley that the mountains cradled on 3 sides. Smoke rose from the chimney in a straight line against the still air. Marcus had kept the home fires burning. As they drew closer, Caleb could make out more details. The fence he'd mended last fall, the well he'd dug the summer before that. Every board and nail represented hours of work, decisions made and lived with. The place looked smaller than he remembered, somehow. Or maybe Eliza's presence just made him see it differently. Marcus appeared on the porch before they reached the hitching post. He had his rifle, but lowered it when he recognized Tucker. Then his eyes found Eliza, and his whole posture changed. You found her, he said. Not a question, statement of fact, like he'd never doubted it, even though Caleb knew he had. Found her. Caleb dismounted, then helped Eliza down. Her legs nearly buckled. Marcus was there in an instant, taking her other arm. Inside, Marcus said. Now, before you both freeze to death on my watch. Between them, they got Eliza into the house. The warmth hit like a physical thing after days of cold. Eliza made a sound that might have been relief or pain, Caleb couldn't tell which. They settled her in the chair closest to the fireplace, the good chair that had been Margaret's. Marcus brought blankets, water, started pulling together something that resembled a meal. He moved efficiently, didn't ask questions yet. Just took care of immediate needs. That was Marcus, practical to his bones. The others made it here? Caleb asked. Yesterday afternoon, Thomas, his daughter, old Chinese woman, told me some wild story about you riding into a blizzard. Marcus glanced at him. Didn't believe it until they showed me their frostbite. Where are they now? Town. I sent them with enough supplies to make it, told them to spread word about what happened. Figure the stage company needs to know they lost a driver. Caleb nodded. That was the right call. The business side of death still needed handling, even when you were too tired to care. Marcus set a pot of something on the table. Stew, from the smell. Nothing fancy, but hot and substantial. He ladled out 3 bowls, didn't wait for anyone to ask. Just started eating, watching Eliza and Caleb over the rim of his spoon. Eliza ate slowly, like her body wasn't sure what to do with food. Caleb forced himself through his own bowl, even though exhaustion had killed most of his appetite. The warmth spread through him, made him realize just how cold he'd been. Your feet, Marcus said to Eliza. Let me see. I'm fine. That wasn't a request. Marcus's voice was gentle but firm. I've seen more frostbite than you've had hot meals.
I know what needs doing. Eliza looked at Caleb. He nodded. She let Marcus unwrap her feet. The older man didn't react to what he saw, just examined each toe carefully, pressing here and there, checking for sensation. His face gave nothing away. Finally, he wrapped them back up, sat back. You'll lose 2 toes on the left foot, maybe 3. The right foot should be fine, just some surface damage. He met her eyes. Could be worse. That's what everyone keeps saying. Because it's true. You walked through hell and only lost a few toes. Most people lose their lives. Marcus stood, started cleaning up the bowls. I'll ride to town tomorrow. Get the doctor. He'll need to take them before infection sets in. Eliza's jaw tightened. How soon? Few days, week at most. The sooner the better. She nodded once, sharp, accepting the verdict without argument. Caleb saw her hands clench in her lap, the only sign of fear or anger or whatever she was feeling. I'll show you your room, Marcus said, softer now. You need rest, real rest, in a real bed. Our room, Caleb corrected. Marcus looked at him. You two even married yet? Not officially. Then she gets the spare room and you sleep in yours. I don't care what you've been through. Propriety still matters under this roof. Eliza laughed. Actually laughed. Tired and a little ragged, but genuine. Your ranch hand is lecturing us about propriety? Someone has to. These two would probably just collapse in the barn and call it good enough. Marcus offered her his arm. Come on, spare room's got a real mattress. Made it myself. Caleb watched them go, Marcus supporting Eliza's weight as they navigated the short hallway. He heard the door open, Marcus's voice explaining where things were. Then Marcus emerged alone, pulled the door mostly closed behind him. She's tougher than she looks, Marcus said quietly. She looks pretty tough already. Fair point. Marcus poured himself coffee from the pot that lived permanently on the stove. Thomas told me what happened. Said she walked out of a wrecked stage into the worst storm in 5 years. Said you rode after her like a madman. Wasn't madness. Wasn't sense either. Marcus took a long drink. But I'm glad you did it. She seems solid. Coming from Marcus, that was high praise. Solid meant reliable. Meant someone who'd hold up under pressure. Meant partner material. Yeah, Caleb said. She is. You love her? The question caught him off guard. I barely know her. That's not what I asked. Caleb thought about it. Love wasn't the right word for what he felt. Respect? Yes. Admiration. A bone-deep certainty that she was someone worth building a life with. But love required time, shared experiences, the slow accumulation of moments that turned strangers into something more. Not yet, he said finally, but I think I could. Marcus nodded like that was the answer he'd expected. She feels the same about you. I can see it in how she looks at you, like she's trying to figure out if you're real or if she imagined someone decent. She say that? Didn't have to. 3 years I worked for Margaret. I learned to read what women don't say. Marcus set down his cup. You planning to marry her quick? Before she changes her mind? Planning to give her time to heal first? Let her decide with a clear head whether this is what she wants. What if she decides it isn't? Then I'll help her get somewhere she does want to be. Caleb met Marcus's eyes. I didn't pull her out of that snow to trap her here. You're a better man than most. Just trying to be a decent one. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the fire crackle and the wind beginning to pick up outside. Another storm was coming. Caleb could feel it in his bones. Not as bad as the last one, but enough to keep them housebound for a day or two. I'm going to check on her, Caleb said, standing. Marcus waved him off. Go. I'll tend the horses. Caleb knocked softly on the spare room door. Eliza's voice called him in. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, still dressed, staring at her wrapped feet. You should sleep, he said. Can't. Keep thinking about tomorrow, and the day after, about what comes next. She looked up at him. I'm going to lose part of myself. Pieces of me are going to die, and there's nothing I can do about it. Caleb sat beside her. The bed was narrow, barely fit them both. You're more than your toes. I know that. Doesn't make it easier. No, it doesn't. She leaned against him, heavy with exhaustion and something deeper. When the doctor comes, will you be there? When he does it? If you want me to be. I do. I don't. She paused. I don't want to be alone for that. You won't be. I promise. They sat like that until her breathing evened out, until she was asleep against his shoulder. Caleb eased her back onto the bed, pulled the blankets over her. She didn't wake, just turned on her side and buried deeper into the warmth. He stood there watching her for a moment. In sleep, her face relaxed, looked younger, vulnerable in a way she never allowed when conscious. He wondered what she'd been like before life taught her to be hard, then decided it didn't matter. The woman she was now, scarred and stubborn and stronger than iron, was the one he needed. The next few days fell into a rhythm. Marcus rode to town, returned with Doc Harrison, a gruff man in his 60s who'd seen every kind of frontier injury there was. He examined Eliza's feet with professional detachment, confirmed Marcus's diagnosis, and scheduled the amputation for 2 days later. "Give the tissue time to declare itself," he said. "Sometimes what looks dead comes back. Sometimes what looks fine turns black overnight. We wait and see what we're really dealing with." Those 2 days were strange. Caleb and Eliza existed in a kind of suspended reality, neither quite married nor quite strangers. They ate meals together, talked about the ranch and what needed doing come spring, avoided discussing the amputation directly, circled around it like wolves around a campfire. The night before Doc Harrison was due back, Eliza couldn't sleep. Caleb found her sitting by the fire, long past midnight, staring into the flames. "You scared?" he asked. Terrified. The honesty of it struck him. No bravado, no pretense, just the truth. "Want me to sit with you?" "Yeah." He settled into the other chair, let the silence stretch, comfortable between them. Outside, snow was falling again. Light this time, just a dusting. The world making itself new. "Tell me something true," Eliza said eventually. "About what?" "Anything. I need to think about something besides tomorrow." Caleb considered. "I was married for 4 years before Margaret died. Everyone said we were happy, and we were, mostly. But there were times I resented her." Eliza looked at him surprised. "For what?" "For needing me. For depending on me. For making me responsible for someone else's happiness." He stared at the fire. "There were days I'd ride out to check fences and think about just keeping going. Not because I didn't love her, but because sometimes love feels like weight, and I wanted to be weightless again." "Did you ever tell her?" "No, and that was worse than the feeling. The dishonesty of pretending I never had those thoughts." He met Eliza's eyes. "I'm telling you now so you know what you're getting. I'm not always going to be easy. There'll be days I'm short-tempered or distant or just plain mean. Days you'll wonder why you came all this way for this." Eliza absorbed that. "Okay, my turn. I told you about Robert, the lawyer. What I didn't tell you was that I almost married him anyway. Almost convinced myself that being wanted, even by someone who'd spent our whole marriage trying to change me, was better than being alone." She paused. "I came west because I was running, not toward something, away from the person I might have become if I'd stayed." "You regret it? Coming here? Ask me in a month, after I've lost the toes and learned to walk again and figured out if this life is actually livable or just another mistake." She smiled, but there was no humor in it. "I'm good at mistakes. Join the club." They sat until the fire burned low, trading confessions like currency. The things they'd done wrong, the people they'd hurt, the versions of themselves they'd left behind. It was intimate in a way that had nothing to do with bodies and everything to do with trust. By the time they finally went to bed, separate beds because Marcus insisted, Caleb felt like he'd known her years instead of days. Doc Harrison arrived at noon the next day with his surgical kit and a bottle of laudanum. He set up in the kitchen, covered the table with clean sheets, boiled his instruments in water that Marcus kept at a rolling bubble. "You sure about this?" he asked Eliza. "Could wait another day or two." "The waiting's worse than the doing," she said. "Let's get it done." Caleb held her hand while Doc Harrison gave her the laudanum. She fought it at first, wanted to stay conscious, but the drug pulled her under despite her resistance. Her grip on Caleb's hand loosened, her breathing deepened. "You can leave," Doc Harrison said to Caleb. "This isn't pleasant to watch." "I promised I'd stay." "Suit yourself." The doctor worked quickly, efficiently. 2 toes on the left foot,
clean cuts through dead tissue. Caleb watched because looking away felt like cowardice. Watched because Eliza had asked him to stay. Watched because bearing witness to her pain was the least he could do. The smell was wrong, burnt flesh as Doc Harrison cauterized the wounds. Caleb's stomach turned, but he held steady. Marcus, standing by with fresh bandages, had gone pale but didn't flinch. 20 minutes start to finish. Doc Harrison wrapped the wounds, cleaned his instruments, packed his kit. Keep them clean. Change the dressing twice a day. Watch for infection, red streaks, fever, foul smell. If you see any of that, come get me immediately. What about pain? Caleb asked. I'll leave laudanum. Use it sparingly. She'll need it most at night. The doctor looked at Eliza, still unconscious on the table. She's got grit, I'll give her that. Most women would have been screaming before I even made the first cut. She's not most women. Clearly, Doc Harrison pulled on his coat. I'll check on her in a week. Until then, keep her off that foot as much as possible. No walking, no standing, let it heal. After he left, Caleb and Marcus moved Eliza to her bed. She was still deep under the laudanum, didn't wake even when they jostled her. Caleb sat beside her, kept watch while Marcus tended to evening chores. She woke near midnight, confused and hurting. Caleb helped her drink water, gave her more laudanum when the pain got too sharp. She cried, quiet tears that she tried to hide. He pretended not to notice, gave her that dignity. It's done, she asked. It's done. How bad? 2 toes, clean cuts. Doc says you'll heal fine. She was quiet for a long time. Then, I want to see. Eliza, I need to see. I need to know what I'm dealing with. Against his better judgment, Caleb unwrapped the bandages. The stumps where her toes had been were raw, stitched, angry red. Eliza stared at them without expression. Okay, she said finally. Wrap them back up. He did. She didn't cry again, didn't speak, just lay there staring at the ceiling until the laudanum pulled her back under. The next week was hard. Eliza couldn't walk, could barely hobble to the outhouse and back with support. She hated the helplessness of it, snapped at Caleb and Marcus when they tried to help. But she let them help anyway because pride was less important than survival. Caleb learned her patterns. How she was meanest in the morning when the pain was worst. How she went quiet when she was scared. How she pushed herself too hard and needed to be told, firmly, to rest. They played cards in the evenings, Eliza propped in bed while Caleb sat in the chair beside her. She was vicious at poker, read him like an open book. He didn't mind losing. Watching her win, watching the satisfaction on her face, was worth more than any pot. You're letting me win, she accused one night. I'm not. You are. You had a straight and you folded. How do you know what I had? Because you do this thing with your jaw when you've got good cards. Little clench, right there. She pointed. Dead giveaway. Caleb touched his jaw, surprised. I do not. You absolutely do. Also, your left eye twitches. Now you're making things up. Am I? She grinned, the first real smile he'd seen since the surgery. Guess you'll never know. They talked about the future in careful terms, what the ranch needed, what repairs had to happen before spring, how they'd divide the labor once Eliza was healed. She had ideas, good ones. Wanted to start a kitchen garden, expand the chicken coop, maybe get a milk cow. We could sell butter in town, she said, and eggs, bring in some cash money instead of just scraping by on cattle. You know how to make butter? I can learn. Can you honestly say this place couldn't use more income? She had him there. The ranch provided, but barely. Any additional revenue would make the difference between surviving and actually prospering. We'll try it, he said. Come spring. Come spring, she echoed. Like a promise. 2 weeks after the surgery, Doc Harrison declared her healing well. The wounds were clean, no infection. She could start putting weight on the foot gradually, build up strength. It would hurt, he warned. The balance would be off. But eventually, she'd adapt. Eliza's first steps were agony. Caleb could see it in the way she gritted her teeth, the way sweat broke out on her forehead. But she took them anyway, stubborn and determined. 5 steps the first day, 10 the second. By the end of the week, she could make it from her room to the kitchen without help. Feels wrong, she said, sitting heavily at the table. Like I'm going to fall over. You'll adjust. Everyone keeps saying that. Because it's true. She shot him a look. You're very optimistic for someone who just watched me nearly faceplant into your stove. I'm realistic. There's a difference. March came, and with it the first hints of thaw. The snow started to retreat, revealing dead grass and frozen mud. Caleb began planning spring work, which fences needed mending, where to move the cattle for grazing, when to start branding calves. Eliza joined the planning sessions, offered opinions that were surprisingly informed. Turned out her father's store had supplied ranchers, and she'd paid attention to what they needed and when. You'll want to brand early, she said, before the calves get too big. Makes it easier. That's a month away still. So start preparing now. Check your irons, make sure your ropes are sound. You wait until the last minute, something will go wrong. It always does. She was right. Caleb found himself relying on her judgment more and more. Not because he didn't trust his own, but because two heads were genuinely better than one. They balanced each other, his practical experience, her theoretical knowledge. Together they covered gaps neither could fill alone. One evening in late March, Marcus pulled Caleb aside. You need to marry that woman. We've talked about it. I don't mean talk. I mean do it. Make it legal before someone else sees how good she is and tries to steal her. Caleb laughed. Nobody's going to steal her. You don't know men. She's smart, capable, easy on the eyes. Someone in town's going to notice, going to make an offer. Marcus's expression was serious. She came here for you. Don't make her wait forever to be sure you want her. I do want her. Then prove it. That night, Caleb found Eliza in the barn. She'd taken to visiting the horses in the evenings, seemed to find peace in their company. She was brushing Tucker when he came in, gentle strokes that the horse leaned into. He likes you, Caleb said. I like him. He's solid, dependable. She smiled. Like someone else I know. Caleb leaned against the stall door. I've been thinking. Dangerous habit. About us. About making this official. Eliza's hand stilled on Tucker's neck. Official how? Marriage. Proper marriage. Not just an arrangement. He paused. If that's what you want. She turned to face him. Is it what you want? I wouldn't ask otherwise. That's not an answer, Caleb. That's you being careful. She set down the brush, gave him her full attention. Do you want to marry me? Not because it's practical or makes sense, but because you actually want to build a life with me specifically. He met her eyes, hazel in the lamplight, sharp and searching. Yes, I want to marry you. I want to wake up next to you for the next 40 years. I want to fight with you about stupid things and make up and fight again. I want to build something with you that's bigger than either of us alone. I want you to be my wife, not my mail-order bride or my arrangement. My wife. Eliza's expression softened. Well, when you put it like that, is that a yes? It's a yes. He kissed her then, the first real kiss they'd shared. It was awkward at first. They were out of practice, both of them, but it settled into something warm and right. When they pulled apart, Eliza was smiling. We should probably tell Marcus, she said. He already knows. Told me tonight I was a fool if I didn't marry you. Smart man. The smartest. They married a week later. No ceremony, just the three of them and a circuit preacher who happened through on his rounds. Marcus stood witness, gruff and pleased. The preacher said the words. Caleb and Eliza repeated them, and just like that they were legally bound. That night, Eliza moved into Caleb's room. They lay in the dark, not touching yet, just adjusting to the reality of sharing space. You nervous? Caleb asked. Terrified. Me too. Really? Really? Haven't done this in 3 years. Don't remember what I'm doing. Eliza laughed, quiet in the darkness. Good. Neither do I. We'll figure it out together. They did. Slowly, carefully, learning each other's shapes and boundaries. It wasn't perfect, nothing ever was, but it was real and honest and theirs. Afterward, Eliza traced the scars on Caleb's chest. Where'd you get these? Barbed wire. Horse spooked, threw me into a fence. He touched the scar on her shoulder. This one? Fell off a loading dock when I was 12, broke my collarbone. She paused. We're a matched set, both broken in places. Both still standing. Yeah, we are. They fell asleep tangled together,
And when Caleb woke in the gray pre-dawn, he felt something he hadn't felt since Margaret died. He felt complete. Not because Eliza filled some void, he'd learned to live with voids, but because she added something new, something he hadn't known he was missing. She stirred beside him, opened her eyes. Morning. Morning. We're married. We are. Seems like we should feel different, but I don't. Feel different, I mean. Give it time. She smiled, stretched. What's the plan for today? Same as every day. Work until we can't anymore, then work some more. Sounds perfect. And somehow, impossibly, it was. Spring came late that year, dragging its feet like it wasn't sure the winter deserved to end. The snow melted in patches, revealing brown earth that turned to thick mud under the intermittent rain. Caleb and Eliza worked from dawn until dark, repairing what the winter had damaged, preparing for the season ahead. Eliza's foot had healed as well as it was going to. She walked with a slight limp, her balance still adjusting to the missing toes, but she'd learned to compensate. Caleb caught her sometimes, early mornings before anyone else was awake, practicing her gait in the yard, walking back and forth, forcing herself to move naturally. She never mentioned it, and he never asked. Some struggles were private. The first time they rode into Silver Ridge together as husband and wife was a Saturday in mid-April. They needed supplies, seed for the garden Eliza wanted to plant, nails for the chicken coop expansion, flour and sugar, and coffee. The usual things that kept a ranch running. The town was bigger than Eliza had imagined from Caleb's descriptions. Maybe 300 people, a main street lined with false front buildings that tried to look more substantial than they were. A general store, a saloon, a church, a schoolhouse, a handful of other businesses clinging to survival. People stared. Caleb felt Eliza stiffen beside him on the wagon seat. He didn't blame her. The stares weren't subtle. Open assessment from men, narrowed-eye judgment from women. A few people nodded greetings to Caleb, but their eyes slid to Eliza with poorly concealed curiosity. They always this friendly? Eliza asked quietly. Give them time. They're not used to new people. They're not used to people my size, you mean? Caleb pulled the wagon to a stop in front of Hanson's general store. They're not used to a lot of things. Doesn't matter what they think. Easy for you to say. You're not the one they're whispering about. But they whispered about me for months after Margaret died. Said I'd go crazy out there alone. Said the ranch would fail. He climbed down, offered her his hand. Let them talk. We've got shopping to do. Inside the store, Mrs. Hanson greeted them with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She was a thin woman in her 50s, with iron gray hair pulled back so tight it looked painful. Caleb, good to see you. Her gaze shifted to Eliza. And this must be the bride we've heard about. Eliza Vance, Eliza said, extending her hand. Pleased to meet you. Mrs. Hanson shook it briefly, the way you might touch something you suspected of being dirty. We heard about your ordeal, the storm, the accident. Must have been terrifying. It was. And you walked through it, on foot. The woman's tone suggested she found this either admirable or insane, possibly both. Very brave, or very foolish. Eliza's smile went sharp. Sometimes they're the same thing. Caleb handed over their supply list, watched Mrs. Hanson's eyebrows climb as she read it. Seeds, lumber, chickens, wire. More than their usual order. Expanding? Mrs. Hanson asked. Building up, Caleb said. Got help now. Can do more. I see. She started gathering items, her movements efficient but cool. Will you be joining the Ladies' Auxiliary, Mrs. Vance? We meet every other Tuesday, do charity work, quilting, that sort of thing. Maybe, Eliza said. Once we're settled. Of course, though I should mention we do prefer our members to be active in the community, regular church attendance, participation in town events. Her smile was thin. We have standards. Eliza's jaw tightened, but she kept her voice level. I'll keep that in mind. They loaded their supplies in silence. As they were finishing, Thomas appeared, the man from the stagecoach, Eliza's fellow survivor. His face lit up when he saw her. Mrs. Vance, I'd heard you'd recovered. He gripped her hand warmly. You look well. Better than when I last saw you, certainly. Mr. Thomas, good to see you. How's your daughter? Sarah's fine, staying with her aunt in town, helping with the children. He glanced at Caleb. I wanted to thank you both, properly. What you did, coming after us in that storm, we'd have died without you. You'd have managed, Caleb said. No, we wouldn't have. I know what dead men look like, and I was looking at 3 of them in that mirror. Thomas's expression sobered. I'm sorry about Patrick O'Brien. I know he went with your wife. Good man. Didn't deserve what happened. Eliza's hand found Caleb's, squeezed once, hard. No, he didn't. We're holding a memorial service for him tomorrow. 1 o'clock, at the church. I hope you'll come. I think he'd want you there, Mrs. Vance. He spoke highly of you and the coach, said you had more spine than most men he'd met. I'll be there, Eliza said quietly.
After Thomas left, they finished loading in silence. Caleb could feel the tension radiating off Eliza, see it in the set of her shoulders. When they were finally on the road back to the ranch, she spoke. They hate me. They don't know you. Mrs. Hanson looked at me like I was something stuck to her shoe. And that woman outside the saloon, the one in the blue dress, she actually turned away when I looked at her. That's Martha Greer. She turns away from everyone. Lost her husband last year. Hasn't been right since. Don't make excuses for them. I'm not. I'm just saying, give it time. Let them see who you are. And what if who I am isn't what they want to see? Eliza's voice was hard. I'm not delicate. I'm not refined. I don't know how to make polite conversation about quilting and charity work. I'm a rancher's wife who can butcher a chicken and mend a fence and shoot straight. That's not what women like Mrs. Hanson respect. Then they're idiots. Maybe, but they're idiots who control whether I'm accepted here or not. She stared at the road ahead. I knew it would be like this. But knowing doesn't make it easier. Caleb didn't have an answer for that. She was right. The town would judge her, was already judging her, and there wasn't a damn thing he could do about it except stand beside her and let his choice speak for itself. The memorial service for Patrick O'Brien was held in the small church on the edge of town. Eliza wore her best dress, the one she'd brought from back east, dark blue and practical, and braided her hair into a crown that made her look severe and dignified. Caleb wore his Sunday suit, the one that only came out for weddings and funerals. The church was maybe a third full. Patrick hadn't had family in Silver Ridge, hadn't known many people, but Thomas and Sarah were there, and Mrs. Chen, and a handful of others whose faces Eliza recognized from the stage or the rescue. The preacher spoke in generalities about sacrifice and duty, about dying while helping others. He'd never met Patrick, clearly. Was just doing his job, filling the space with words because silence felt wrong. Then Thomas stood up and spoke, really spoke, about the man Patrick had been. A gambler, yes, but an honest one. A drifter who'd never settled because he'd never found a place worth settling for. A man who'd made Eliza laugh during the worst days after the crash, who'd shared his coat when she was shivering, who'd insisted on coming with her when she'd decided to walk because he said no one should die alone. He didn't have to come, Thomas said, his voice thick. Mrs. Vance asked him, but he could have said no. Could have stayed with us, taken his chances. But he went anyway, and he kept her going when she wanted to give up. She told me that afterward. Said he talked the whole way, told her stories about riverboat casinos and card sharps in New Orleans, kept her mind off the cold, off the pain. Thomas looked directly at Eliza. He gave his life so she could have hers. That's the measure of a man. Eliza's eyes burned. She'd cried privately in the early mornings when Caleb was doing chores, but not publicly, not where people could see. Now, though, the tears came and she let them. Patrick O'Brien deserved to be mourned properly, not hidden away like something shameful. After the service, people approached her, offered condolences, shook her hand. Sarah hugged her, fierce and quick. Mrs. Chen bowed slightly, a gesture of respect that meant more than words. He liked you, Mrs. Chen said. Told me you reminded him of his sister. Strong woman, he said. The kind who doesn't break easy. I'm sorry I couldn't save him. You tried. That's more than most would do. The old woman's eyes were sharp. Survivors carry guilt. It's natural, but don't let it make you small. He wouldn't want that. On the way out, Mrs. Hanson approached. Her expression was different than it had been at the store, softer, less guarded. Mrs. Vance, I wanted to apologize for my coldness yesterday. She paused, searching for words. I was unkind. You've been through more than most, and I judged you without knowing you. That was wrong. Eliza studied her, surprised. What changed? Thomas. He came by last night, told me what happened, what you did. Walking through that storm to reach your husband, keeping Patrick company so he wouldn't die alone. Mrs. Hanson's voice dropped. I lost my son in a winter storm 5 years ago. He was 14, went out to check on livestock, never came back. We found him in the spring. She blinked hard. Reading about storms is one thing, surviving them is another. You did what my boy couldn't. That means something. I'm sorry about your son. Thank you, and I'm sorry for judging you. Mrs. Hanson straightened. The auxiliary meets Tuesday. If you'd like to come, you'd be welcome. Genuinely welcome. After she left, Caleb took Eliza's hand. See? Time. One person doesn't make a town. No, but it's a start. The weeks that followed were busy. Caleb taught Eliza the rhythms of ranch work, when to move cattle, how to spot illness in livestock, the 1,000 small tasks that kept everything running. She learned fast, asked good questions, wasn't afraid to get her hands dirty. Marcus watched them work together with something like satisfaction. You two fight less than most married couples, he observed one evening. We fight plenty, Eliza said, just not where you can see. That's called respect. Wish more people had it. The garden went in, rows of beans and squash and tomatoes, herbs along the edge. Eliza tended it like it was precious, which it was. Fresh vegetables would make the difference between bland meals and good ones. The chicken coop expanded, filled with 24 hens that Eliza named despite Caleb's protests that naming food was a bad idea. They're not all food, she argued. Some are layers, they earn their keep. Until they stop laying. Then they're stew. But until then, they're Henrietta and Beatrice and Margaret. Caleb stopped. You named a chicken after my wife? After our wife, Margaret too. She's the bossy one who pecks all the others. Eliza grinned at his expression. What? You said she was fierce. I did. But I didn't mean... He stopped, started laughing. You're impossible. You married me anyway. I did. They sold their first butter and eggs in town 6 weeks after the garden went in. Eliza had worked out a deal with Hanson's store. They'd supply dairy and eggs, get credit toward other goods. Not cash money, but close enough. The chickens were producing more than they could use, and the milk cow Caleb had surprised Eliza with was a steady producer. Word spread. Soon people were coming directly to the ranch, buying fresh eggs and butter without the store markup. Eliza kept careful accounts, tracked every penny. At the end of the first month, she showed Caleb the numbers. We cleared $12. That's good. That's better than good. That's a third of what the cattle bring in with a fraction of the work. She tapped the ledger. If we expand the coop again, get more layers, we could double this. Where do we get money for more chickens? We use this money. Invest it back. She was already scribbling calculations. 6 more hens at 50 cents each is $3. They'll lay 5 eggs a week each, that's 30 eggs. Sells for 15 cents. We recoup the investment in 7 weeks, then it's pure profit. Caleb watched her work, saw the excitement in her face. This was her element. Numbers, planning, building something from scratch. You really thought this through. It's what I'm good at. You handle the cattle, I'll handle everything else. Everything else is a lot. Good. I like being useful. By midsummer, the ranch was running smoother than it had in years. Caleb handled the heavy labor and livestock management. Eliza managed supplies, accounts, the garden, the chickens, the butter and egg trade. Marcus did whatever needed doing, filled gaps, kept things steady. They fell into a rhythm that felt natural, right. Arguments happened, usually about money or priorities or whose turn it was to deal with the goddamn chickens, but they worked through them, learned each other's triggers, soft spots, the things that mattered versus the things they could compromise on. One night in late July, after a particularly brutal day of haying, they collapsed on the porch. The sun was setting, painting the mountains red and gold. Eliza had her feet up, was rubbing the one that still gave her trouble. Hurts? Caleb asked. Always hurts. I'm just used to it now.
She worked her thumb into the arch, grimaced. Doesn't stop me, though. That's what matters. You ever regret it? Coming here? She considered the question seriously. Some days, when the work's brutal or the town ladies are being petty or my foot aches so bad I can't sleep, those days I think about what my life might have been if I'd stayed back east. Comfortable, maybe. Safe. She lowered her foot, looked at him. But then I think about who I'd be in that life. Small, apologetic, constantly trying to fit into spaces too narrow for me. And I know I made the right choice. Even with everything that happened, the storm, Patrick, your toes, especially because of those things, they proved I'm stronger than I thought, stronger than anyone thought. She reached over, took his hand. You gave me that, the chance to prove it, to myself mostly, but also to everyone who ever said I was too much or not enough. You were always enough. I know that now, didn't then? She squeezed his hand. So no, I don't regret it. Do you? Regret sending for me? Not even a little. Even though I'm stubborn and argumentative and I named a chicken after your dead wife? Especially because of those things. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun finished setting. Inside, Marcus was cooking something that smelled like burned meat and optimism. The chickens were settling in for the night, their soft clucking a familiar soundtrack. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called and was answered. This was home. Not perfect, not easy, but real and solid and theirs. The town's attitude toward Eliza shifted gradually. Not all at once, not universally, but enough to matter. The women who'd been coldest thawed slightly when they realized Eliza didn't want to compete with them, didn't care about the social hierarchies they'd built. She was polite, helpful when asked, but kept her distance. Made it clear she had better things to do than gossip. Some respected that, others resented it. Eliza didn't particularly care either way. What mattered more were the people who saw past the surface. Thomas and Sarah, who visited occasionally and always left laughing. Mrs. Chen, who traded recipes with Eliza and offered blunt advice about managing men. Doc Harrison, who appreciated Eliza's practical approach to medicine and started consulting her about frontier remedies. And the ranchers' wives who came to buy eggs and stayed to talk about crop rotation and livestock and the 100 daily struggles of making a life in hard country. Women who understood that strength came in many forms, that survival meant adaptation, that judging each other was a luxury none of them could afford. Margaret, too, the chicken, became something of a local legend. She was mean, territorial, and absolutely refused to be intimidated by anything up to and including Marcus's horse. People started asking about her when they came to buy eggs. That demon bird still ruling the roost? One rancher asked, grinning. With an iron wing, Eliza confirmed. Tried to reorganize yesterday, put her in a different nesting box. She pecked me bloody and moved right back. My wife says that chicken's got your personality. Your wife's a smart woman. Stories spread about Eliza's walk through the storm, about how she'd kept going when Patrick O'Brien couldn't, about the toes she'd lost and the work she did anyway. The stories got exaggerated with retelling, turned her into something bigger than life. Eliza hated it at first, the way people looked at her like she was some kind of folk hero. I just walked, she told Caleb after someone in town had asked for the 5th time about her ordeal. I put one foot in front of the other until I couldn't anymore. That's not heroic, that's just refusing to die sitting down. To you, maybe. To them, it's proof that someone like them could survive the same thing. Someone like them. Regular people. Not special, not chosen. Just ordinary folks who refuse to quit. He touched her face. That's the kind of hero people actually need. Not someone perfect, someone stubborn enough to keep going. By harvest time, the ranch was thriving in ways Caleb hadn't thought possible. The cattle were healthy, the hay was stored, the garden had produced more than they could eat. Eliza's egg and butter operation had become a genuine income stream. They weren't rich, not even close, but they were stable, solid, building something that would last. One October evening, Eliza pulled out the ledgers and showed Caleb the numbers for the year. Revenue up, expenses down, a small profit tucked away for emergencies.
We did it, she said. We actually made it work. We did. I mean, really work. Not just survive, but thrive. She looked at him with something like wonder. A year ago, I was in my father's debt-ridden store, watching everything fall apart. Now I'm here, and we're building something real.
You're building something real. I'm just along for the ride. Don't do that. Don't diminish what you brought to this.
She held his gaze. You gave me a chance when no one else would. You rode into a storm to find me. You stood by me through the worst of the recovery. You believed I could do this when I wasn't sure I could. Her voice softened. That's not nothing, Caleb. That's everything. He kissed her then, slow and deep, tasting salt and sweetness and the future they were building together. When they pulled apart, Eliza was smiling. So, she said, what do we build next? Whatever we want. Sky's the limit. The sky's pretty big out here. Then we've got a lot of room to grow. They talked late into the night, planning the next year. More chickens, maybe. A second milk cow. Expanding the garden, perhaps hiring help during harvest. Dreams built on the foundation of what they'd already accomplished. Realistic, but ambitious. Outside, the first snow of the season began to fall. Light, tentative, nothing like the storm that had nearly killed them both. Caleb watched it through the window, felt Eliza settle against his side. You worried about winter? She asked. Not this year. Why not? Because last winter I was alone. This winter, I've got you. Sentimental. True, though. She tilted her head back, looked at him. I love you. Haven't said it yet, but I do. Just so you know. The words landed soft and sure, filled a space Caleb hadn't realized was still empty. I love you too. Have for a while now. How long? Since you named a chicken after Margaret, that's when I knew you were perfect. I'm not perfect. Perfect for me, then. Close enough? They stayed up until the snow stopped, watching the world turn white outside their window. Starting over, clean and new. Ready for whatever came next, because they'd survived the worst already. Everything else was just living. The second winter came easier than the first, but it still came hard. Snow piled high against the barn doors, ice formed thick on the water troughs, and the wind howled through gaps in the walls that Caleb swore he'd sealed last fall. But this time they were ready. Supplies stocked, livestock sheltered, routines established. This time they faced it together. Eliza had changed in the year since the storm. Not softened, she was still sharp-tongued and stubborn as hell, but settled, like she'd finally found the shape she was meant to fit into. She moved through the ranch with confidence now, her limp barely noticeable except on the coldest mornings when the old injury ached. She'd learned to trust the foot, to work with what remained rather than mourn what was lost. One February morning, Caleb found her standing in the barn, staring at the empty stall where Tucker used to stay. The old horse had died 3 weeks earlier, quietly in his sleep. Just laid down one night and didn't get up. Caleb had buried him on the ridge overlooking the valley, the place where he'd first caught sight of home after finding Eliza in the snow. Still thinking about him? Caleb asked. He saved my life. Eliza's voice was quiet. Carried me when I couldn't walk, got us through that storm. I never properly thanked him. Horses don't need thanks. They just need good care and respect. You gave him both. I gave him carrots and brushing. You gave him purpose. She turned to face Caleb. That's what matters, isn't it? Not just surviving, but having a reason to. You getting philosophical on me? Maybe. Winter does that. Too much time to think. She walked over to the new horse, a younger gelding they'd bought to replace Tucker. This one's good, strong, but he's not Tucker. Nothing ever is. That's not a reason not to try. Eliza smiled at that. You sound like you're talking about more than horses. Maybe I am. They fell into the rhythm of winter work, feeding livestock, breaking ice, hauling hay. The chickens had slowed their laying in the cold, but enough eggs came through to keep the town customers satisfied. Eliza had added candles to their product line, learned to make them from beef tallow and sell them for decent money. Always thinking, always finding new ways to build. Marcus had taken to spending more time in town during the coldest months, courting a widow named Anne who ran the boarding house. He was sheepish about it at first, like admitting he wanted companionship was somehow weakness. "You should marry her," Eliza said one evening when Marcus returned from another visit. "What makes you think I want to marry her?" "Because you've been wearing your good shirt every time you go to town for the past month, and you whistle when you come back." Marcus's ears went red. "I don't whistle." "You absolutely whistle. Some tune I don't recognize, but definitely whistling."
Eliza grinned. "It's fine to be happy, Marcus. You don't have to hide it. I'm too old to be courting like some young fool." "You're 53. That's not dead." She exchanged a glance with Caleb. "And Anne's a good woman. Smart. Runs a tight business. You could do worse." "Could do better, too." "Could you, though?" Eliza leaned forward. "Marcus, you've spent 3 years helping us build this place. Don't you think you deserve to build something of your own?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then, "What if I mess it up? Haven't courted a woman in 30 years. Don't remember how it works." "Nobody remembers how it works. You just do it, and hope you don't embarrass yourself too badly." Caleb stood, poured Marcus more coffee. "Ask her to marry you. Worst she can say is no." "That's what I'm afraid of." "Then you're afraid of the wrong thing. What you should be afraid of is spending the rest of your life wondering what might have been." Caleb sat back down.
Take it from someone who almost made that mistake. Sometimes you have to ride into the storm. Marcus left for town the next morning and came back 3 days later with Anne riding beside him on the wagon, her belongings packed in the back. They were married by week's end, a quiet ceremony in the ranch house with Eliza and Caleb as witnesses. Anne moved into Marcus's cabin, and suddenly the ranch felt more like a community than just a workplace. Anne was practical and no nonsense, had been running the boarding house alone since her first husband died in a mining accident 5 years back. She and Eliza took to each other immediately, two women who understood that frontier life required strength more than delicacy. "I like her," Eliza told Caleb after Anne's first week. "She doesn't pretend things are easier than they are." "High praise coming from you." "It is. Most women I meet want to talk about weather and recipes, like those are the only things worth discussing. Anne talks about business and politics and how to keep men from thinking they know everything." Eliza paused. "She lost a baby once, stillborn. Told me about it like it was just another hard fact of life, not something to whisper about." "You two are a lot alike." "We are. Except she's better at hiding what she's feeling. I never learned that trick." "Good. I like knowing what you're thinking." "Even when I'm thinking you're wrong?" "Especially then. Keeps me honest." Spring brought change beyond the seasonal thaw. Sarah, Thomas's daughter from the stagecoach, showed up at the ranch in late March with a proposition. She wanted to open a school in Silver Ridge, teach the children who were growing up wild and illiterate. But she needed funding, support, someone to vouch for her to the town council. "Why us?" Caleb asked, though he suspected he knew. "Because you're respected now, both of you." Sarah looked between them. "The town sees what you've built here, how you work together, how you've made something from nothing. They listen to you." "They tolerate us," Eliza corrected. "That's not the same as respect." "It's close enough. And Mrs. Vance, they talk about you, about what you survived, how you've thrived despite everything." Sarah leaned forward. "You're proof that someone can come here with nothing and build a life. That's powerful. That's what this town needs to see, that investment in the future matters." They helped her, spoke to the town council, pledged money they couldn't quite afford, convinced other ranchers to do the same. The school opened that fall in a converted storage building, 8 students ranging from 6 to 14. Sarah taught reading, writing, arithmetic, history, gave those kids a chance at something beyond just surviving. Eliza visited sometimes, helped with the younger ones who struggled with numbers. Caleb caught her once, patiently explaining multiplication to a 10-year-old girl who reminded him of what Eliza might have been like at that age. Too big for her desk, too smart for most people's comfort, determined to prove herself anyway. "You're good at that," he said later. "At what?" "Teaching, being patient with people who need help. I remember what it's like to struggle, to feel like everyone's judging you for not knowing something you were never taught." She looked thoughtful. "Maybe I should have been a teacher instead of a rancher's wife." "Maybe you're both." Can't be both. Don't have time. Then be whatever you want to be today, and something else tomorrow. Life's too short to fit into one box. She kissed him for that, quick and hard. When'd you get so wise? Married you, didn't I? That was desperation, not wisdom. Same thing sometimes. The ranch continued to grow. They added beef cattle to their dairy operation, expanded the chicken coops again, planted an orchard that would take years to produce but represented faith in a future they expected to be there. Other ranchers started coming to them for advice. How Eliza managed her accounts, how Caleb rotated his grazing, what Marcus knew about horse breeding. Without meaning to, they'd become leaders in the community, not through social climbing or political maneuvering, but through simple competence and the willingness to share what worked. One summer evening, 2 years after the storm, the town held a dance to celebrate Silver Ridge's 10th anniversary. Caleb hadn't wanted to go. He hated dancing, hated crowds, but Eliza insisted. We're part of this town now, whether we like it or not. Might as well act like it. I'll step on your feet. You've done worse to my feet. I'll survive. The dance was held in the largest barn in town, lanterns strung from the rafters, a fiddle player and a guitarist providing music that was more enthusiastic than skilled. People milled around, drinking punch that someone had definitely spiked, talking too loud over the music. Caleb danced with Eliza, awkward and stiff, trying not to embarrass them both. But she laughed when he stumbled, pulled him closer when he tried to keep formal distance, made it clear she didn't care about grace or appearance, just wanted to be there with him. See, she said. Not so terrible. Still terrible, just terrible together. Best kind of terrible. Mrs. Hanson approached during a break in the music, her expression warm in a way it never used to be. Mrs. Vance, I wanted to tell you the auxiliary is organizing a winter relief fund for families who struggle during the cold months. We'd like you to help manage it. Why me? Because you understand what it means to have nothing, to start from scratch. Mrs. Hanson's voice was sincere. We need someone who won't judge people for needing help, who'll see it as investment rather than charity. I'm not sure I'm the right person. You're exactly the right person. Think about it. After she left, Caleb squeezed Eliza's hand. See? Respect. Or they just want free labor. Take the compliment. I don't trust compliments. I know, but maybe start trying. Thomas found them later, glass of suspiciously strong punch in hand. He was looser than Caleb had ever seen him, smiling wide. Caleb, Eliza. Hell of a party. It is, Caleb agreed. Been meaning to tell you both. I'm heading back east, selling the store, taking Sarah with me. She's got a teaching position in Philadelphia. Real school, real salary. Eliza's face fell. When? End of summer. Give me time to sell the business, settle affairs. He looked at them seriously. I wouldn't be alive to do it if not for you two. Want you to know that. Want you to know that every day I get with my daughter, every laugh we share. That's because you rode into a storm when sensible people said not to. You'd have done the same, Caleb said. No, I wouldn't have. I'd have waited, played it safe, probably lost everyone. Thomas raised his glass. To people who don't play it safe, to people who ride into storms. They drank to that, the three of them, survivors bound by shared experience that couldn't quite be put into words. The years rolled forward, each one building on the last. The ranch prospered, became known throughout the territory as one of the best-run operations in Silver Ridge. The egg and butter business expanded into cheese, then into preserved goods, jams and pickles that Eliza made and sold at a premium. They hired help during busy seasons, gave young men and women a chance to learn ranching the right way. Marcus and Ann built a small house on the edge of the property, started their own modest dairy operation that complemented rather than competed with Caleb and Eliza's. The four of them became family in the way frontier people did, not through blood, but through shared hardship and mutual survival. 5 years after the storm, Caleb woke one morning to find Eliza already up, standing on the porch in her nightdress despite the cold. He pulled on pants and a shirt, joined her. You okay? Just thinking. She gestured toward the valley, where morning mist was burning off in the rising sun. You remember when I first saw this place? How small it looked? I remember. Doesn't look small anymore. Looks like home. She turned to him. I've been thinking about Patrick O'Brien, about what Thomas said at the memorial, how Patrick gave his life so I could have mine. You think about him a lot. Sometimes, usually when I'm happy, which seems wrong, like I shouldn't get to be this content when he's dead. She wrapped her arms around herself. But then I think, what would honor him more? Being miserable out of guilt or building something worth the sacrifice he made? You know the answer to that. I do. Doesn't make it easier. She looked at Caleb. I want to do something for him. Something real. Not just guilt, but actual memory. 2 months later, they broke ground on a community center in Silver Ridge, a place for meetings, celebrations, shelter during emergencies. They funded most of it themselves, with contributions from other ranchers who'd benefited from Caleb and Eliza's help over the years. They named it the Patrick O'Brien Memorial Hall. At the dedication, Eliza spoke. Not long, not flowery, just honest. Patrick O'Brien was a gambler who probably never expected to be remembered for anything more than a good card game. But when it mattered, when someone needed help, he showed up. He walked into a storm knowing he might not walk out, because he believed no one should die alone. She paused, scanning the crowd. This building represents that same principle, that we show up for each other, that we don't leave people to face hard things alone. Patrick understood that. I hope we can too. The applause was genuine, heartfelt. Caleb stood beside her, proud in a way that had nothing to do with ego and everything to do with witnessing someone become the fullest version of themselves. That night, lying in bed, Eliza was quiet. Caleb could feel her thinking, the wheels turning. What is it? He asked. I was wrong about something. Back when I first came here, I thought I needed to prove I was strong enough to survive. That was the whole point, showing everyone I could do it despite my size, despite what people said. She turned to face him in the darkness. But that's not what strength is. Strength isn't proving you can survive alone. It's building something with other people that none of you could build by yourselves. Took you 5 years to figure that out? I'm slow. You knew that when you married me. Not slow, just thorough. She laughed, settled against his chest. We did good, didn't we? Built something real. We did. Think it'll last? After we're gone? Caleb thought about that. The ranch, the community center, the school, the network of relationships they'd helped foster. All of it built on the foundation of one desperate ride into a blizzard. Yeah, he said, I think it will. 7 years after the storm, on a winter afternoon that was cold but clear, Caleb took Eliza riding. Not for work, just to ride. They followed the trail he'd taken that night, the one that led to where he'd found her. The landscape had changed. Trees had grown. The trail had shifted with erosion and use. Markers he'd used for navigation were gone or altered. But he found the spot, recognized it by the way the mountains framed the valley, the curve of the land. Here, he said, dismounting. Eliza got down, looked around. This is where you found me? Near enough. You were over there, about 20 yards, collapsed in the snow. She walked to the spot, stood looking down like she could see her own ghost. I don't remember much. Just cold and then warmth, your voice telling me not to give up. You were already not giving up. I just reminded you. No, you saved me. Let's not rewrite history. She turned to face him. Why'd you bring me here? Because I wanted you to see it. Not the place you almost died, but the place your life really started. He gestured at the landscape. Everything we built, everything we became, it all started right here, with you refusing to quit and me refusing to let you. And Patrick refusing to let me die alone. And Patrick, Caleb agreed, and Tucker and Marcus and everyone else who made choices that led us here. He took her hands. I wanted you to see that this spot isn't about death or loss or trauma. It's about decision, about the moment when the future became possible. Eliza's eyes were wet, but she was smiling. You practiced that speech, didn't you? All week. Did I get too flowery? Little bit, but I'll allow it. She pulled him close, kissed him with the easy familiarity of years. Thank you for coming after me, for believing I was worth finding. You were always worth finding. You just needed someone to see it. They stood there for a while,
watching the sun track west across a sky so blue it hurt to look at. The same sky that had hidden behind storm clouds 7 years ago. The same mountains that had witnessed her struggle and survival. The same frontier that had tested them both and found them equal to the challenge. "Ready to go home?" Caleb asked eventually. "Yeah, but not because I'm running from this place anymore. Because I'm running toward what we built. That's the only reason that matters." They rode back as the sun set, painting the snow orange and pink. The ranch came into view, larger than it had been, more prosperous, more alive. Smoke rose from multiple chimneys now. Lights glowed in windows. Voices carried on the still air, Marcus and Anne arguing about something trivial, the way married people do. Eliza reined in her horse, sat looking at it all. "You know what the wildest part is? I almost didn't come. Almost turned back a dozen times on the journey west. Told myself I was being crazy, that no sane woman travels across the country to marry a stranger." "What changed your mind?" "Fear of going back to who I was, of being small and apologetic and grateful for scraps." She looked at him. "I was more afraid of that life than I was of dying in a blizzard. Still am." "Good, because that woman wouldn't have survived out here." "No, but this woman did." She smiled. "We did." They rode the last stretch in comfortable silence, returned the horses to the barn, walked to the house together. Anne had dinner waiting. Marcus was complaining about something that needed fixing. Normal, ordinary. The kind of life that looked simple from the outside, but was built on a foundation of choices and chances and sheer, stubborn will. Later, after dinner, after Marcus and Anne had returned to their own place, Caleb and Eliza sat by the fire. She was mending clothes, he was reviewing accounts, domestic, peaceful. The kind of evening that would have bored him senseless 7 years ago, but now felt like the whole point of everything. "I love this," Eliza said suddenly. "What?" "This. Right now, just sitting here doing nothing important with you." She set down her mending. "I spent so much of my life trying to be important, trying to matter. And now I realize this is what matters. Not grand gestures or proving points, just building a life with someone who sees you clearly and chooses you anyway." "I do see you clearly. I know, that's why it works." She moved to sit beside him, let him put his arm around her. "I'm difficult. I'm opinionated. I don't compromise easily." "Neither do I." "Right. So we're perfectly matched in our imperfection." Something like that. She was quiet for a moment, then, "If you could go back knowing everything that would happen, the storm, the loss, all of it, would you still send that letter? Still ask me to come?" Caleb didn't hesitate. "Yes, every time. In every version of this story, I'd still choose you. Even knowing I'd name a chicken after your dead wife? Especially knowing that." Eliza laughed, the sound warm and real, and Caleb thought about all the versions of himself that had existed before her. The grieving widower, the isolated rancher, the man who'd been surviving but not really living. All of those versions had led here, to this moment, to this woman who'd walked through hell to reach him. Years later, when people asked Caleb about the storm, and they always asked, he'd tell them the simple version. He rode out, he found her, they survived. The end. But the real story was more complicated than that. The real story was about two broken people who decided that broken together was better than whole apart. About strength that came not from perfection, but from refusing to give up, even when giving up was the sensible choice. The real story was about a ranch that became a community, about losses that turned into lessons, about a gambler named Patrick O'Brien who gave his life for a woman he barely knew because he understood that some things mattered more than survival. The real story was about Eliza, who walked through a blizzard with 2 missing toes and an unshakable belief that she deserved better than what she'd left behind, who built something from nothing and never apologized for taking up space, who taught a whole town that strength didn't look the way they thought it did. But Caleb never told people that version. Some truths were too personal, too hard-won to share with strangers. Those truths belonged to him and Eliza, lived in the spaces between their words, in the way they moved together through their days, in the life they'd built that didn't need explaining to anyone but themselves.
20 years after the storm, Caleb stood on the same ridge where he'd buried Tucker. The valley had changed, more buildings now, more people, more life. The ranch had become a landmark, the place people pointed to when they talked about what was possible with hard work and partnership. Eliza stood beside him, older now, her hair streaked with gray, her limp more pronounced but no less capable. They'd survived droughts and floods, cattle disease and market crashes, all the 1,000 small disasters that frontier life threw at them. They'd survived together. "Think we made a difference?" Eliza asked. "Look at the valley. What do you think?" She looked, and Caleb looked with her. Saw the school that Sarah had started, expanded now to serve 40 students. Saw the memorial hall that hosted weddings and town meetings and emergency shelter. Saw the ranches run by people they'd trained, using methods they'd shared. Saw a community that had grown because two stubborn people had refused to let hard circumstances define their limits. "I think we tried," Eliza said. "I think we showed up and did the work and didn't quit when it got hard. That's all anyone can do." "That's everything anyone can do." She leaned against him, and he put his arm around her, and they stood there watching the sun set on a life well lived. Not perfect, not easy, but real and earned and completely theirs. Later, much later, people would tell the story of the mail-order bride who walked through a blizzard and the rancher who rode into hell to find her. The story would grow with each telling, become legend, the details smoothing out until it sounded like fate rather than choice. But Caleb and Eliza knew the truth, knew it wasn't fate that brought them together, but desperation and hope and a willingness to take ridiculous chances on people they barely knew. Knew it wasn't destiny that kept them together, but daily decisions to choose each other even when easier options existed. They knew that strength wasn't about never falling down. It was about getting back up, about walking forward even when your feet were frozen and the path was unclear and everyone said you should stop. They knew that love wasn't a lightning bolt or a storybook romance. It was showing up. Day after day, year after year, choosing the same person over and over until choosing them became as natural as breathing. They knew that some storms you rode into not because you were brave, but because staying put was worse than moving forward. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, you came through the other side with exactly what you needed, even if it didn't look the way you'd imagined. Most importantly, they knew that the story everyone told wasn't really about them at all. It was about what people needed to believe, that someone could start with nothing and build everything, that loss could transform into strength, that the wilderness could be tamed if you were stubborn enough. Let them believe it. The truth was harder and simpler both. You survived not because you were special, but because you refused to be anything less than exactly who you were. You built not because you had some grand vision, but because sitting still meant dying. You loved not because you found perfection, but because you found someone whose imperfections matched yours. And sometimes, if you were lucky, that was enough. Caleb and Eliza walked back to the ranch as full dark settled, their shadows long in the lamplight from the windows. Behind them, the ridge stood silent, holding its secrets. The place where a desperate search had ended and a real life had begun. The place where everything had changed and nothing had changed, and that contradiction somehow made perfect sense. Home.